I never thought one simple question could destroy my marriage. It did not happen because of money. It did not happen because of another man. It happened because of one tiny person who had just come into this world. The day I brought my baby home, I believed my life was finally complete. I had no idea that within a few days, the man I loved would look at me like I was a stranger. Before all this, Grant and I lived a simple life in a small apartment. Nothing about us was perfect, but I believed we were happy. We worked, paid bills, cooked cheap dinners, and watched old shows on the couch when we were too tired to talk. Sometimes we argued. Sometimes we slept with our backs turned. But by morning, we always found our way back to each other. That was what I believed marriage was. I did not know how quickly trust could disappear. That morning, I woke up feeling strange. My stomach felt heavy, and even the smell of coffee made me sick. At first, I thought it was stress. Grant and I had both been working too much, and I had been sleeping badly for days. But when the same thing happened again, the next morning, one quiet thought came into my mind. On my way home from work, I stopped at a small drugstore and bought a pregnancy test. I kept it deep inside my purse like it was a secret. When I reached home, Grant was still at work. I went straight to the bathroom, locked the door, and took the test with shaking hands. I placed it on the sink and stood there, staring at it. One line appeared, then the second line slowly came up. For a few seconds, I could not even breathe. I picked up the test and looked at it again and again. "No," I whispered. Then I smiled and covered my mouth with my hand. I wanted to call Grant right away, but then I stopped myself. This was not something I wanted to say over the phone. I cleaned my face, wrapped the test in a small towel, and waited for him to come home. Every small sound outside the door made my heart jump. When his key finally turned in the lock, I stood up so fast that the towel almost fell from my hand. Grant walked in with his work bag on his shoulder. "Why are you looking at me like that?" he asked. I tried to speak, but my voice did not come out. He put his bag down slowly. "Mara, what happened?" I held out the towel with the test inside. He opened it, looked down, and went completely still. "Is this real?" he asked in a low voice. I nodded, already crying. For 1 second, he just stared at me. Then he laughed, pulled me into his arms, and said, "We are going to have a baby." For the next few weeks, Grant became softer than I had ever seen him. At night, he put his hand on my stomach and asked, "Can the baby hear me yet?" I laughed and said, "Grant, the baby is the size of a bean." He said, "Then my bean needs to know my voice." Sometimes he talked to my stomach while I sat on the couch. "Hey, little one," he would say, "your mom is doing all the work, so be kind to her." I would roll my eyes, but inside I felt safe. I thought, this is the man I chose. This is the father my baby will have. Grant wanted to tell his family right away. I wanted to wait, but he was too excited. That Sunday, we went to his parents' house for dinner. His mother, Diane, hugged Grant first, then gave me a light hug, like she was afraid I might leave a mark on her dress. His father, Harold, smiled kindly and said, "Mara, you look tired. Sit down, please." Grant could not wait until dinner. He stood beside me and said, "We have news." Diane looked at him quickly. "What news?" Grant held my hand and said, "Mara is pregnant." Harold smiled at once and said, "That is wonderful." Diane smiled too, but her eyes stayed sharp. She looked at my stomach and said, "Well, I hope this baby looks like a Bellamy." I laughed softly because I thought it was just a joke, But Grant's sister Brielle was sitting across the table with her husband, Owen. She leaned back in her chair and said, "Yes, because some babies make people ask questions." The table became quiet. Owen looked at her and said, "Brielle, come on." Grant's smile faded. "What does that mean?" he asked. Brielle lifted both hands and gave a small fake laugh. "Relax, I am only joking. Everyone is so sensitive now." Diane tapped her fork on her plate and said, "A woman must understand one thing. When a baby is born, people look for family features. That is normal." I looked at Grant, hoping he would say something stronger, but he only said, "Can we just be happy tonight?" After that dinner, I started noticing small things. Diane would ask, "Are you eating enough?" But her voice sounded more like blame than care. Brielle would touch my stomach without asking and say, "Let's see who this little mystery looks like." Once, when Grant left the room, she came close to me and whispered, "You know, my brother is very trusting. Too trusting sometimes." I stepped back and said, "What are you trying to say?" She smiled and said, "Nothing, Mara. Why are you nervous?" I told Grant in the car, "Your sister makes me uncomfortable." He held the steering wheel and said, "Brielle talks too much. Don't take her seriously." I said, "But she keeps saying strange things." Grant sighed. "She says strange things to everyone. That is just her personality." Months passed. My body became heavy. I could not sleep well. I had pain in my back and my feet hurt all the time. Still, some nights were beautiful. Grant would bring me water and say, "Do you need another pillow?" I would say, "I need a new body." He would laugh and say, "I cannot buy that, but I can rub your feet." In those moments, I believed we were strong enough for anything. I believed his family's little comments could never touch us because he loved me. I did not know that love can be strong and weak at the same time. I did not know that doubt can wait quietly in someone's mind. At my baby shower, Diane and Brielle acted sweet in front of everyone. They put up pale pink balloons and gave me a cake with tiny white shoes on top. But even there, Brielle found a way to make people laugh at me. When one of my friends said, "I wonder if the baby will have Mara's eyes," Brielle smiled and said, "Or maybe someone else's." A few women laughed because they thought it was a joke. I felt my face burn. Grant was standing near the kitchen, talking to Owen. He did not hear it. I looked at Brielle and said, "That is not funny." She leaned close and said, "Then why are you smiling like you are scared?" Owen heard that part. He walked over and said, "Brielle, stop it." She rolled her eyes and said, "I cannot say anything in this family anymore." Later, in the bathroom, my neighbor and friend Ruby found me wiping my eyes. She closed the door and said, "Mara, what happened?" I shook my head and said, "Nothing, I am just tired." Ruby crossed her arms and said, "Do not lie to me. Was it Brielle again?" I looked down. "She keeps making comments, like this baby will not be Grant's." Ruby's face changed. "That is disgusting," I whispered. "I do not want to make trouble." Ruby put her hand on my shoulder and said, "You are not making trouble. They are, and Grant needs to see it." I said, "He loves his family." Ruby said, "Then he should love truth too." When my due date came closer, Grant became nervous. Every time I touched my stomach, he said, "Is it time?" I would say, "Grant, I just need to stand up." He packed the hospital bag twice and checked the car seat every night. One evening, he sat beside me and said, "I want to be a good father." I smiled and said, "You will be." He looked at me with serious eyes and said, "Promise?" I took his hand and placed it on my stomach. "She already knows you," I said. "She kicks every time you talk." He smiled, and for a second I forgot every ugly word Diane and Brielle had ever said. Our daughter came 5 weeks ago on a cold morning after a long night of pain. I held Grant's hand so hard he said, "Mara, I think you are breaking my fingers." I told him, "Good, then you will remember this." He laughed, but his eyes were wet. Nurse Carla kept saying, "You are doing great, Mara, just a little more." Then I heard a cry. It was small, sharp, and perfect. My whole world stopped. Nurse Carla placed my baby on my chest, and I started crying before I even saw her clearly. "Hi, baby," I whispered. "Hi, my little girl." Grant stood beside me, looking down at her, but his smile came slowly, too slowly. At first, I thought he was just shocked. Many new fathers look scared. But then I saw his eyes moving over her tiny face, her very light hair, and her pale blue eyes. Nurse Carla smiled and said, "She is beautiful." I looked at Grant and waited for him to say the same. He did not. He stared at our daughter like he was trying to solve a problem. I said, "Grant, she is here. Look at her." He blinked and said, "Her hair is so light." I smiled weakly and said, "I know, it is cute." He looked at me. His voice was quiet, but cold. "Mara, why does she look like that?" For a second, I thought I had heard him wrong. I was still tired, still shaking, still holding our baby against my skin. I said, "What do you mean?" Grant looked toward the door, then back at the baby. Her hair, her eyes. We both have brown hair. We both have brown eyes. I laughed a little because I wanted the moment to stay normal. Babies can look different. Hair changes. Eye color changes too. You know that. He did not laugh. He said, "This is not normal." Nurse Carla looked uncomfortable and said, "Newborn features can surprise families. It happens." Grant did not answer her. He only looked at me like I had hidden something from him. The next day, Diane and Brielle came to the hospital. Harold came too, holding a small pink blanket. He looked at the baby and said, "Well, hello there, little one." His voice was kind, but Diane stepped closer and froze. "Oh," she said, just one word, but it felt like a slap. Brielle looked at the baby, then at Grant, then at me. "Wow," she said, "she is very different." I held my daughter closer and said, "Her name is Ivy." Brielle smiled without warmth. "Ivy, pretty name. Did Grant choose it?" Grant said, "We chose it together." Brielle tilted her head. "That is good. At least that part is clear." I looked at Grant, waiting for him to defend me. He looked down. Diane sat beside him and said softly, but loud enough for me to hear, "Grant, I am your mother. I am not trying to hurt anyone, but you have to protect yourself." My mouth went dry. Protect himself from what? I asked. Diane looked at me with calm eyes and said, "Mara, no one said anything." I said, "You are saying it without saying it." Brielle crossed her legs and said, "If there is nothing to hide, then there is nothing to fear." Harold said, "That is enough." But the damage was already there. Grant's face had changed. When the nurse came later with birth certificate papers, she asked simple questions. "Mother's full name?" I answered. "Father's full name?" I looked at Grant. He was sitting by the window, looking at his phone. Nurse Carla waited with her pen ready. Grant did not speak. I said, "Grant Bellamy." The nurse wrote it down, but I saw her glance at him. After she left, I asked, "Why did you not answer?" He rubbed his forehead and said, "I was thinking." I said, "About what?" He stood up and said, "Do not start, Mara." I looked at our sleeping baby and whispered, I just gave birth. I am not starting anything. When we came home, I wanted peace. I wanted our small apartment to feel safe again. Ruby had left soup in the fridge and a note that said, call me any time, even at 3 a.m. I cried when I read it because kindness felt rare. Grant carried the baby inside, but he did not hold her long. He placed her in the bassinet and stepped back. I said, do you want to sit with her? He said, I need a shower. That night, Ivy cried for hours. I was sore and weak. I called, Grant, can you help me? He came to the doorway, but did not enter. What do you need? He asked. I said, hold her for a few minutes, please. He looked at Ivy, then said, I do not know how. I said, neither do I, but I am trying. On the third night, I found Grant sitting in the kitchen in the dark. I was carrying Ivy against my chest, walking slowly because my back hurt. I said, why are you awake? He did not look at me. I cannot sleep. I said, me neither. He finally turned toward me. I want a paternity test. The room felt like it lost all air. I said, what? He said, I need to know. I held Ivy tighter. You need to know if your daughter is your daughter? He closed his eyes. Mara, do not make it sound like that. I almost laughed from pain. How else should I make it sound? Grant stood up and said, you know what everyone is thinking. I said, no, Grant. I know what your mother and sister are feeding you. He raised his voice a little. Do not blame my family, I said, then blame yourself. You are the one standing here asking me for proof, after I carried your child. He looked hurt, but he did not step back. If you have nothing to hide, why are you afraid of the test? I stared at him. I am not afraid of the test. I am afraid of what this says about you. He whispered, I just need proof. I whispered back, and I needed my husband. The next morning, Grant packed a bag. I stood in the bedroom doorway, holding Ivy in one arm, while my stitches pulled and my whole body hurt. Where are you going? I asked. He did not look at me. To my parents' house, I said. You are leaving us? He closed the zipper on the bag and said, I need space. I said, I just had a baby. He said, I know. I stepped closer and said, no, you do not know. You sleep, you shower, you eat, I bleed, I cry, I feed her, I hold her. And now you are leaving because your sister made a joke and your mother whispered poison in your ear? His face tightened. Schedule the test, Mara. Then he walked past me and the door closed. That first day alone felt longer than my whole pregnancy. Ivy cried. I cried. My back hurt so badly, I had to sit on the floor with her because I was afraid I would drop her. Ruby came after work and found me trying to make tea with one hand. She took the cup from me and said, sit down. I said, I am fine. She looked at my face and said, no, you are not. I started crying again and said, he left, Ruby. He actually left. She sat beside me and said, then let him be ashamed later. Right now you and Ivy need food and sleep. I whispered, what if he never comes back the same? Ruby said, then you will learn who he really is. Grant sent messages, but they were short and cold. Did you book the test? How is the baby? Send a picture? I wanted to send him a picture of my tired face and say, this is what your doubt did, but I did not. I sent one photo of Ivy sleeping, then turned off my phone. That night, Diane called. I almost did not answer, but I thought maybe she wanted to help. Her voice was smooth. Mara, I hope you understand. Grant is only protecting his future. I said, his future is sleeping beside me in a bassinet. Diane sighed. Do not be dramatic. A test will make everything clean. I said, no, Diane, a test may prove blood, but it will not clean the way you treated me. She became quiet, then said, you are very emotional. I said, I just had a baby. What is your excuse? Brielle was worse. She sent a message that said, you should not be angry if you are innocent. I stared at it for a long time. Then another message came. My brother deserves truth. I typed, your brother had a wife who loved him and a newborn baby who needed him. That was truth. She replied with a laughing emoji. I did not answer again. Later, Ruby saw the messages and said, block her. I said, if I block her, she will tell everyone I am hiding. Ruby looked at me and said, Mara, people like Brielle do not need proof to talk. They only need a mouth. The test appointment was on a gray Tuesday morning. I wore the cleanest shirt I had and wrapped Ivy in the pink blanket Harold had brought. Grant was already outside the clinic when I arrived. He looked tired, but not sorry. I wanted him to hug me. I hated myself for wanting it. He looked at Ivy and said, she looks bigger. I said, babies grow, Grant, even when their fathers are thinking. He looked away. Inside, the nurse explained everything. We will take a cheek swab from the baby and from Mr. Bellamy. Grant nodded. I asked, do you need mine too? The nurse said, not for this test. I looked at Grant and said, see, even science knows I am the mother. After the samples were taken, we stood outside near the parking lot. Grant held his keys in his hand. I said, are you coming home? He said, I think I should wait for the result. I nodded slowly. So if the result says she is yours, then we become a family again, like turning on a light? He said, Mara, please. I said, no, listen. You left me when I was bleeding, hurting, and scared. You made me walk into a clinic with my newborn like I was on trial. His eyes became wet, but he still said, I need to be sure. I said, then be sure. But understand this, Grant. The test may tell you if you are her father. It will not tell me if you are still my safe place. 3 days later, the clinic called. Your results are ready. You can come in today. My hand started shaking. Ruby was with me, folding baby clothes. She said, do you want me to come? I said, no, I need to face this myself. She held Ivy for a moment and kissed her head. Your mom is stronger than all of them, she whispered. At the clinic, Grant was waiting with Diane and Brielle outside. When I saw them, I stopped walking. Why are they here? I asked. Grant said, they wanted to support me. I laughed once, but it had no joy in it. Support you from what? Your wife and baby? Diane said, Mara, do not make a scene. I looked at her and said, I did not bring an audience. You did. The nurse called only Grant and me inside. Brielle tried to follow, but the nurse said, parents only. Brielle's face twisted for 1 second before she smiled. Grant sat beside me, but there was space between us. The nurse placed the paper on the table and said, the result is clear. Grant picked it up. His hands were shaking. His eyes moved across the page, then stopped. All color left his face. He read it again. I leaned closer. The words were simple. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. I already knew the truth, but seeing it on paper made my whole body weak. I looked at Grant and said, there, your proof. Grant looked like someone had hit him. Mara, he started. I shook my head. Do not say my name like that. He swallowed. I was wrong. I said, yes. He whispered, I am sorry. I felt something break open inside me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the paper at him. Instead, I laughed. It came out strange and painful. Grant looked hurt. "Why are you laughing?" he asked. I said, "Because if I do not laugh, I will fall apart. You made me prove our baby to you, and now you are sitting here like you are the one who was hurt." He covered his face with one hand. I said, "You got your answer. Now I need mine." Why was my word worth nothing? Outside, Diane stood up quickly. "Well?" she asked. Grant did not answer. I took the paper from his hand and held it out. Brielle grabbed it before Diane could. She read it, and her mouth opened a little. Owen had come too, standing near the wall with his arms crossed. He looked at the paper, then at his wife. "Satisfied?" he asked quietly. Brielle looked embarrassed and said, "Tests can be wrong." Grant snapped his head toward her. "Brielle, stop," she said. "I am just saying, people fake things all the time." Owen stared at her. "You are talking about a baby," Brielle said. "I am talking about my brother." Owen answered, "No. You are talking about your need to be cruel." Diane tried to soften the moment. "Grant, we only wanted to protect you." Grant looked at his mother and said, "You told me to doubt my wife." Diane said, "I told you to be careful." I looked at her and said, "Careful would have been bringing food. Careful would have been helping me sleep. Careful would have been telling your son to hold his daughter." Harold, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "Diane, she is right." Diane turned to him. "Do not start with me." Harold said, "No, I should have started earlier." Brielle rolled her eyes and said, "Everyone is acting like we committed a crime." Owen looked at her and said, "Maybe not a crime, but I am starting to see your heart, and I do not like it." Grant did not come home with me that day. He said, "I need to think." I stared at him in the parking lot. Again, he looked ashamed. "I do not know how to face what I did." I said, "Then start by facing it." He said, "Mara, I am sorry." I answered, "Sorry is not a home. Sorry is not a night feeding. Sorry is not the first week you missed." I put Ivy in the car seat and closed the door. Before I got in, I said, "Stay at your parents' house if you want, but do not call this space. Call it what it is. You ran away." Then I drove home before he could answer. For the next 2 days, I did not wait by the phone. I took care of Ivy. Ruby came over with groceries and said, "Did he call?" I said, "Yes." She asked, "Did you answer?" I shook my head. Ruby nodded. "Good." I looked at Ivy and said, "I do not know what good is anymore." Ruby sat beside me and said, "Good is whatever keeps you steady, not whatever makes him comfortable." That evening, Grant sent a long message. "I know I failed you. I know I let my fear and my family speak louder than you. I want to come home, but I know I do not deserve to just walk back in. Please let me see Ivy." I read it 3 times. Then I wrote back, "You can see her tomorrow. This is about being her father, not about fixing us in one day." When Grant came the next morning, he stood at the door with a bag of diapers, baby wipes, and flowers. I looked at the flowers and said, "Those are not for me, are they?" He looked confused. I said, "Because flowers die in a few days. I need something that stays." He lowered his hand. I did not know what to bring. I opened the door wider and said, "Bring honesty, bring patience, bring the version of you that does not leave when your mother whispers." He nodded and stepped inside. Ivy was awake in her bassinet, moving her tiny hands. Grant walked to her slowly. "Hi, Ivy," he whispered. His voice broke. "I am your dad. I am so sorry I was late." He asked if he could hold her, and I said yes. He picked her up carefully, like she was made of glass. Ivy looked at him with those pale blue eyes that had caused so much pain. Grant started crying quietly. "She is beautiful," he said. I stood beside him, my arms crossed because I did not trust my own feelings. "She was beautiful the day she was born, too," I said. He nodded. "I know," I said. "No, you did not know. You saw a problem. I saw our daughter." He kissed Ivy's forehead and whispered, "I will spend the rest of my life trying to make that right." I said, "Do not promise a lifetime today. Start with today. Change her diaper." He did change it, badly. Ivy cried, and he looked at me in panic. "Did I hurt her?" I said. "No, she just knows you are new at this." He tried again, and I showed him how to fasten the diaper. Later, he washed bottles while I fed Ivy. He did not ask me to forgive him. He did not touch me like everything was normal. He just stayed. That helped more than flowers. When Ivy finally slept, he sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "I want to come home." I said, "You can come here to help with Ivy. You can sleep on the couch for now, but we are not okay." He said, "I understand." I looked at him. "Do you? Because your family will not like this." Grant looked down. "Then they will have to learn." Diane called that night. Grant answered on speaker because I asked him to. Her voice came through sharp and worried. "Grant, are you at Mara's apartment?" He said, "It is my apartment too." Diane said, "Do not let guilt make you foolish." Grant looked at me, then closed his eyes. "Mom, I was foolish when I left." Diane said, "We were only helping." Grant said, "No, you and Brielle made my fear worse. You made my wife feel dirty after giving birth." Diane gasped. "How can you speak to me like that?" Grant said, "How could you speak to Mara like that?" There was a long silence. Then Diane said, "That girl has changed you." Grant said, "My daughter changed me. My wife should have never had to." Brielle did not stay quiet either. She posted a sweet-looking picture of herself holding someone else's baby and wrote, "Real family always knows the truth." Ruby saw it and showed me. I felt sick. "She is still doing it," I said. Ruby asked, "Do you want to say something?" I shook my head. "No, I am tired." Grant saw the post later and called Brielle. I heard only his side. "Take it down," he said. Then, "Do not pretend you did not mean Mara." Then, "I am not asking." His voice became louder. "You called my newborn a mystery, Brielle. You laughed while my marriage was breaking." He listened for a moment, then said, "No, Mara did not turn me against you. You did that yourself." What I did not know then was that Brielle's own home was already full of cracks. Owen had been watching her for months. He had seen how she talked about people, how she twisted stories, how she smiled in public and became cruel in private. One evening, while Grant was at our apartment, Owen called him. Grant put the phone on low, but I heard enough. Owen said, "Your sister told my mother that Mara admitted something to her." Grant stiffened. "Admitted what?" Owen said, "That the baby might not be yours. I knew it sounded wrong, so I asked where she heard it. She said Mara told her at the shower." Grant looked at me. My mouth fell open. "I never said that," I whispered. Grant told Owen, "Mara never said that. Brielle made it up." Owen came to our apartment the next day. He looked tired and embarrassed. "Mara," he said, standing near the door, "I am sorry. I should have stopped her earlier." I said, "You do not have to apologize for her." He shook his head. "Maybe not, but I lived with her. I knew she could be mean. I kept calling it stress or family loyalty or just her mouth, But this was different. Grant said, "What happened?" Owen sighed. "I found messages, not just about Mara. She has been lying to me about money, too. She told me she was helping your mom with bills, but she was using my card for shopping and hiding it. When I asked her, she said I was controlling. Then I found out she told people I was the problem." He looked at the floor. "I cannot live like that anymore." I did not smile. I did not feel happy. I only felt tired. Brielle had tried so hard to make my home fall apart, but her own home was breaking under the weight of her lies. I did not need to push anything. I did not need revenge. Her own words were doing enough. A week later, Diane called Grant crying because Owen had left their house and was staying with his brother. Diane said, "Brielle is destroyed. You need to talk to Owen." Grant said, "Why?" Diane said, "Because family helps family." Grant said, "Did family help Mara?" Diane became quiet. Grant said, "Owen is not leaving because of Mara. He is leaving because Brielle lied to him. Stop blaming my wife for things your daughter did." Brielle came to our apartment one afternoon without warning. Grant was at work, and I was feeding Ivy. When I opened the door, Brielle looked different. Her makeup was messy, and her eyes were red. "I need to talk to Grant," she said. I said, "He's not here." She looked past me like she wanted to enter anyway. "Then I will wait." I stayed in the doorway. "No." Her face hardened. "You are enjoying this, aren't you?" I looked at her for a long second. "Enjoying what?" she said. "My husband leaving, everyone blaming me, Grant not listening to Mom." I shifted Ivy in my arms and said, "Brielle, I have a 5-week-old baby. I am tired. I am healing. I am not sitting here thinking about your marriage." She laughed bitterly. "You act so innocent," I said. "No, I act like someone who has other things to survive." She stepped closer and said, "If you had not made such a big drama, none of this would have happened." I said, "I did not ask your brother to doubt me. I did not ask you to lie. I did not ask Owen to leave." Brielle's eyes filled with angry tears. "You think you are better than me?" I shook my head. "No, I think you are hurting, but you keep turning your hurt into poison." She looked like she wanted to slap me with words, but Ivy made a small sound in my arms. For the first time, Brielle looked at her without a joke. Maybe she saw how small she was. Maybe she saw what she had attacked. She whispered, "I never meant to hurt the baby." I said, "But you did, and you hurt me too." She turned and walked away, without saying sorry. Grant and I started counseling 2 weeks later. I told him it was not a choice. "If you want this marriage," I said, "we need help from someone who is not your mother, your sister, or my pain." He agreed. Miss Helen Brooks was calm and direct. In our first session, she looked at Grant and asked, "Why did you believe doubt faster than you believed your wife?" Grant stared at his hands. "Because I was scared." She asked, "Scared of what?" He said, looking foolish. "Raising a child that was not mine, everyone knowing before me." I felt tears rise in my eyes. "So your pride was louder than my pain," I said. Grant looked at me and whispered, "Yes, and I hate that." Ms. Brooks turned to me and asked, "What do you need from him now?" I said, "I need him to stop acting like the test fixed everything." Grant looked up quickly. "I do not think that," I said. "Sometimes you do. You hold Ivy and smile, and I can see you hoping I will forget." He shook his head. "I do not want you to forget." I said, "Good, because I cannot." I remember sitting on the couch alone. I remember your messages asking for the test, not asking if I had eaten. I remember your mother looking at my baby like she was evidence. Grant wiped his eyes and said, "Tell me all of it. I will listen." Miss Brooks nodded and said, "That is the beginning, not the end, the beginning." At home, Grant slowly changed. He took the night shift when he could. He learned how Ivy liked to be rocked. He stopped answering Diane's calls every time she wanted to complain. When Diane said, "You are choosing Mara over your family," Grant said, "Mara and Ivy are my family." When Brielle sent long, angry texts, he did not bring them to me. He said, "This is my side to handle." One night, I woke up and found him sitting in the living room with Ivy asleep on his chest. He was whispering, "I missed your first days, but I am here now. I am here now." I stood in the hallway and listened. I wanted to forgive him in that moment, but forgiveness did not come like a light. It came like small drops of rain after a long, dry season. Owen finally filed for separation from Brielle. I heard it from Grant, not because I asked, but because Diane called crying again. "Your sister's life is falling apart," Diane said. Grant answered, "Then she needs to be honest for once." Diane said, "You sound so cruel." Grant said, "No, Mom. Cruel was watching Mara suffer and calling it protection. Cruel was letting Brielle mock a newborn. Cruel was making lies feel normal." Diane cried harder, but Grant did not bend. When he hung up, he sat beside me and said, "I am sorry I did not speak like that before." I looked at him and said, "Me too." He nodded. "I know I cannot get those days back." I said, "No, you cannot, but you can decide what kind of man you are from now on." 1 month later, Harold came to visit alone. He brought a small yellow dress for Ivy and a bag of groceries for me. He stood awkwardly in the kitchen and said, "Mara, I owe you an apology." I said, "You were kinder than the others." He shook his head. "Kind and silent is not always enough." Grant looked at his father with surprise. Harold continued, "I saw what Diane and Brielle were doing. I thought staying quiet would keep peace, but silence helped the wrong people." I felt my throat tighten. "Thank you for saying that." Harold looked at Ivy and smiled sadly. "She has my grandmother's eyes, you know." Grant froze. "What?" Harold nodded. "My mother's mother. Pale blue eyes, almost white blonde hair when she was a baby. I have an old photo somewhere." Grant looked like the floor had moved under him. "You never told me," Harold said. "You never asked. You only listened to fear." That night, Harold sent the photo. It was an old picture of a little girl with bright light hair and pale eyes, sitting on a porch in a white dress. Grant stared at the screen for a long time. "She looks like Ivy," he whispered. I said, "Yes." He sat down slowly. "All this time," I finished for him, "all this time she was yours. She looked like your family, just not the part of your family you remembered." Grant covered his mouth and cried harder than I had ever seen. I did not rush to comfort him, not because I wanted him to suffer, but because I had learned not to carry every pain in the room. Some pain belonged to him. He needed to hold it. Brielle tried once more to pull Grant back to her side. She called him and said, "Owen is leaving me because everyone made me look evil." Grant asked, "Did you lie about Mara?" She stayed quiet. He asked again, "Did you tell people she admitted the baby might not be mine?" Brielle said, "I was angry." Grant said, "That is not an answer." She cried and said, "You do not understand. Mom always loved you more." Then Mara came, and everyone acted like she was perfect. Then the baby came, and I felt like I did not matter. Grant's face softened. but his voice stayed firm. Feeling small does not give you the right to break people. She said, so you are choosing her? Grant looked at me, then at Ivy. I am choosing truth. Life did not become perfect after that. Some days I still felt angry when Grant touched my shoulder. Some nights I remembered the hospital and turned away from him in bed. He did not complain. Once he whispered, "Do you hate me?" I looked at the ceiling and said, "No, but sometimes I hate what you did." He nodded in the dark. "I can live with that if you let me keep trying." I turned toward him and said, "Trying means you do not get tired when I am still hurt." He said, "I know." I said, "Trying means you do not ask me when I will be normal again." He said, "I will not." I said, "Trying means our daughter never feels like love depends on proof." His voice broke. "Never." Slowly, our apartment became a home again. Not the same home as before, but maybe a more honest one. Grant cooked dinner while I fed Ivy. He washed tiny clothes and learned which ones shrank in the dryer. He went to doctor visits and asked questions. When Dr. Elaine Porter said, "Her eyes may stay blue or they may change," Grant smiled and said, "Either way, they are perfect." I looked at him when he said that. He looked back at me, and I saw shame in his face, but also love. After the appointment, he said, "I wish I had said that the first day." I said, "So do I." He nodded. "I will spend my life making sure she hears it now." Diane took longer. She wanted to visit, but I told Grant, not until she apologizes without excuses. At first, Diane refused. She said, "I will not beg to see my grandchild." Grant said, "Then you will not see her?" 2 weeks later, she came with Harold. She sat on our couch, stiff and proud, and said, "Mara, I am sorry if you felt hurt." I looked at Grant. He looked at his mother and said, "No." Diane blinked. "No?" Grant said, "That is not an apology." Diane's face turned red. Harold said softly, "Diane." She looked at Ivy, then at me. Her voice changed a little. "I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I doubted you. I'm sorry I made your first days as a mother harder." I did not smile. I only said, "Thank you, it will take time." Diane nodded, and for once, she did not argue. As for Brielle, her life kept moving without me touching it. Owen did not come back. He told Grant, "I hope she gets help, but I cannot be the person she blames while she keeps lying." Brielle moved back in with Diane for a while. People in the family started seeing what Owen had seen for years. The sharp comments, the fake tears, the way she made every problem someone else's fault. I never celebrated it. I never called her to hurt her. I never posted anything. I only held my daughter and lived my life. Sometimes that is the strongest answer. Sometimes people do not need enemies. Their own choices follow them home. One evening, when Ivy was almost 3 months old, Grant and I sat on the couch with her sleeping between us. The TV was on, but neither of us was watching. Grant said, "Do you think we will be okay?" I looked at Ivy's tiny hand resting on the blanket. "I think we are learning," I said. He nodded slowly. "That is not the same as okay." I said, "No, but it is better than pretending." He reached for my hand, then stopped, waiting. I looked at his hand for a moment, then placed mine in it. His fingers closed around mine carefully, like he knew trust was something he had to hold gently. "Thank you," he whispered. I said, "Do not thank me yet. Just keep showing up." I used to believe love meant never doubting each other. Now I know love is also what happens. After doubt tries to destroy everything, it is the truth you choose when fear is loud. It is the apology that comes without excuses. It is the person who stays for the crying baby, the hard nights, and the conversations that hurt. Grant broke something in me, and I will not pretend he did not, but he also chose to face it, day after day, without asking me to heal faster for his comfort. I learned that trust is not a small thing. It is the floor under a marriage. When it breaks, everyone falls. I also learned that I am stronger than I thought. I can stand with a baby in my arms and still speak the truth. I can love someone and still demand respect. I can forgive slowly without forgetting myself. My daughter came into this world with light hair and pale blue eyes, and people tried to turn her beauty into suspicion. But now when I look at her, I do not see the pain they caused. I see the little girl who showed me the truth about everyone around me. Some people stayed, some people changed, some people destroyed their own homes with their own hands. And me, I kept living, kept loving my child, and kept choosing peace without losing myself. Commentary time. Now let's start the commentary, because this story is not just about a baby, a test, and a broken marriage. This story is about trust. It is about fear. It is about what happens when one small doubt becomes bigger than love. When I heard Mara's story, the first thing I felt was pain. Just think about it for a moment. A woman gives birth. Her body is weak. Her heart is full. She is holding her baby for the first time. That should be a soft moment. That should be a happy moment. That should be the kind of moment a husband never forgets. But for Mara, that moment became the start of deep hurt. Her husband did not look at her with love. He looked at her with doubt. And that one look changed everything. What do you think about Grant in the beginning? Was he just scared, or was he cruel? This is not a simple question. Some people may say, he had a right to ask for proof. But other people may say, he had no right to break his wife when she needed him most. And that is where this story becomes very real. Fear can come into any marriage. Doubt can come into any home. But the way we act in fear shows who we really are. Grant was afraid of looking foolish. He was afraid that people would laugh at him. He was afraid that the baby was not his. But in that fear, he forgot something very important. He forgot Mara. He forgot the woman who carried his child. He forgot the woman who was tired, sore, and alone. That is why his mistake was not small. Mara's pain was not only about the paternity test. The test was painful, yes, but the deeper pain was this. Her husband did not believe her voice. She said, "This is your baby." He said, "I need proof." She said, "I did not cheat." He said, "We will see." Those words can break a person from inside. Because when someone you love does not trust you, you start feeling like a stranger in your own life. Mara did not only feel accused, she felt abandoned. She felt judged. She felt like she had to stand in court for a crime she never did. And the sad part is, this happened when she had a newborn baby in her arms. Let's talk about Diane and Brielle too, because they made the situation worse. Sometimes the biggest damage in a family does not come from shouting. It comes from small comments, one little line, one fake smile, one soft warning. Diane did not scream at Mara at first. Brielle did not openly say everything at first, but they kept adding poison. They said things like, "I hope the baby looks like a Bellamy," and "Some babies make people ask questions." These lines sound small, but they are not small. They plant doubt. They make a weak person weaker. And Grant should have stopped them early. He should have said, "Do not speak about my wife like that." but he stayed quiet too many times, and silence can also hurt. Brielle's character is very interesting because she is not just a bad sister-in-law. She is a person who enjoys control. She likes to make others feel small. She talks like she is protecting her brother, but really, she is feeding drama. We can see this kind of person in real life too. Some people say, "I am just being honest," but they are not being honest, they are being mean. Some people say, "I am only joking," but the joke is made to hurt someone. Brielle used jokes like a knife. She smiled, but her words were sharp. And the sad thing is, her own husband Owen was watching all of this. He was slowly seeing her real face. Now here is an important point. Mara did not take revenge on Brielle. She did not make a plan. She did not try to destroy her marriage. She did not run after her with anger. Mara was busy surviving. She was feeding her baby. She was healing. She was trying to breathe. And that is why Brielle's ending feels natural. Her own lies followed her. Her own cruelty came back to her. Owen did not leave because Mara attacked her. Owen left because he saw the truth. He saw that Brielle could hurt a new mother and still call herself innocent. He saw that she could lie, twist words, and blame others. That kind of person can break any home, even her own. This is a strong lesson for all of us. Sometimes you do not need to fight back. Sometimes you just need to stay calm and let people show who they are. Mara did not need revenge. She needed peace, and peace is not weak. Peace can be very strong. When Brielle came to Mara's door and said, "You are enjoying this," Mara did not scream. She did not celebrate Brielle's pain. She simply said she was tired, she was healing, and she was not thinking about Brielle's marriage. That line is powerful because it shows maturity. Mara's life was not about destroying someone else. Her life was about protecting her baby and herself. What about Grant's apology? Do you think it was enough? This is another big question for the audience. Many stories make apology look easy. Someone says sorry, then everything becomes good again. But real life is not like that. When trust is broken, sorry is only the first step. It is not the whole road. Grant said sorry, but Mara did not open the door to the old marriage right away. She said, "You can be here, you can help, but we are not okay yet." That was the right thing to say. She did not punish him. She did not push him away forever. But she also did not pretend that nothing happened. That is self-respect. I liked the way Mara made Grant show change through action. She did not ask for big gifts. She did not ask for flowers. She did not ask for dramatic words. She asked him to show up, change the diaper, hold the baby, take the night shift, listen when she speaks, defend her when his mother calls. These are small things, but small things build trust again. Love is not only "I am sorry." Love is washing bottles when you are tired. Love is holding the baby at night. Love is saying, "My wife is my family," even when your mother is angry. Love is choosing truth when lies are easier. The counseling scenes also matter a lot. I think they made the story more honest, because a broken marriage cannot heal only with hugs and tears. Sometimes people need help to speak clearly. Ms. Brooks asked Grant a very simple question. Why did you believe doubt faster than you believed your wife? That question hits hard, and maybe we should all ask ourselves something like that. Why do we sometimes believe gossip faster than love? Why do we trust fear faster than the person who has stood beside us? Why do we listen to outsiders and ignore the person inside our home? These are not easy questions, but they are needed. Mara also learns something big about herself. At the start, she believed her marriage was her safe place. Then that safe place broke. But after the pain, she found another safe place inside herself. She learned that she could stand alone if she had to. She learned that loving someone does not mean losing yourself. She learned that forgiving someone does not mean forgetting the hurt. This is a very important message, especially for women who feel pressure to forgive fast. Forgiveness should not be forced. Healing needs time. If someone hurts you deeply, they do not get to decide when you should be okay again. I also want to talk about the baby, Ivy. She is just a baby, but she changes the whole story. Her light hair and blue eyes became the reason for doubt, but later we learn that those features were part of Grant's own family history. That twist is painful because it shows how foolish the doubt was. The baby looked different, yes, but different did not mean wrong. Different did not mean betrayal. Sometimes people judge what they do not understand. Instead of asking with love, they accuse with fear. Ivy did nothing wrong. She came into the world innocent, but adults around her turned her face into a question. That is very sad. Harold's apology is also important. He was not as cruel as Diane or Brielle, but he was silent. And he admitted that silence was not enough. This is something many people need to hear. If someone is being hurt in front of you and you stay silent, your silence can help the wrong side. Harold was kind, but he was late. Still, his apology mattered because it showed growth. He said, "Kind and silent is not always enough." That is a very simple line, but it is true. Sometimes we think we are good because we are not doing bad things. But if we see bad things and say nothing, we still play a part. Diane's apology was not perfect at first. She said, "I am sorry if you felt hurt." That is not a real apology. A real apology does not hide behind if. A real apology says, "I hurt you, I was wrong." Grant corrected her, and that was a good moment. It showed that he was finally protecting Mara. Not with anger, but with truth. Diane had to say the real words. She had to admit she doubted Mara and made her first days as a mother harder. That was not easy for her, but it was needed. And Mara's answer was also strong. She did not say, "It is okay." She said, "Thank you, it will take time." That is honest. Now let me ask you something. If you were Mara, would you let Grant come back? Would you give him another chance? Or would you say the trust is gone forever? There is no easy answer. Some people may say, he left at the worst time, so he does not deserve another chance. Other people may say, he made a terrible mistake, but he changed and took responsibility. The story does not force one answer. It shows that healing is possible, but only when the person who caused the hurt accepts the full truth. Grant did not get a free pass. He had to listen. He had to face shame. He had to change every day. That is why this story feels more like life. In real life, people are not always fully good or fully bad. Grant did a very bad thing, but he also learned. Diane was proud and hurtful, but even she had to face her mistake. Harold was silent, but he found his voice. Brielle kept blaming others, and that is why her life kept falling apart. Each person's ending came from their own choices. Mara did not control their endings, she only controlled herself. That is a beautiful message. We cannot always control what people do to us, but we can control what we accept next. The biggest lesson from this story is simple. Trust is not a small part of love. Trust is the floor under love. If trust breaks, The whole house shakes. A marriage needs love, yes, but it also needs respect. It needs loyalty. It needs the courage to defend each other when other people talk. If you are married, your partner should not have to fight your family alone. If your family is wrong, you should be brave enough to say it. Because after marriage, your home needs a wall around it. Not a wall of pride, but a wall of respect. Outsiders should not be able to walk in and destroy it with whispers. Another lesson is about motherhood. Mara had just given birth, and still people expected her to explain herself, defend herself, and stay calm. That is unfair. A new mother needs care. She needs rest. She needs food. She needs love. She does not need suspicion. She does not need family drama. She does not need to prove her pain. When Grant left her, the test became more than a test. It became a symbol of how alone she was. That is why the audience feels so much hurt for her. She was not only fighting doubt, she was fighting loneliness. And let's not ignore Ruby. Ruby was not family by blood, but she acted more like family than many people in the story. She brought food, she checked on Mara, she spoke truth. She did not make the story about herself. That is real friendship. Sometimes the people who help us most are not the people with the same last name. They are the people who show up when life is ugly. Ruby did not fix everything, but she made Mara feel less alone. That matters. Sometimes one good friend can help a person survive a very dark time. In the end, this story is not about a perfect happy ending. It is about a real ending. Mara and Grant are not magically fine. They are learning, they are talking, they are rebuilding. That is better than fake peace. Mara still remembers what happened, and she has the right to remember. Grant keeps trying, and he must keep trying. Ivy grows in a home that is not perfect, but more honest than before. And Mara learns that peace does not mean staying quiet when people hurt you. Peace means speaking the truth, setting limits, and not letting bitterness take over your heart. So now I want to ask you, what part of this story touched you the most? Was it the hospital scene, when Grant looked at the baby with doubt? Was it the paternity result, when the truth came out? Was it Brielle's natural downfall? Was it Mara saying that the test proved he was the father, but it did not prove he was a good husband? Or was it the ending, where Mara chooses peace, but does not lose herself? Tell me what you think, because stories like this make us look at real life in a deeper way. They make us ask what love really means when things become hard. For me, the heart of this story is Mara's strength. She did not become loud. She did not become cruel. She did not chase revenge. She simply stood still in the truth. She protected her baby. She told Grant what he broke. She allowed change, but she did not give away her self-respect. That is not weakness. That is quiet power. And maybe that is the best kind of power, because it does not need to destroy anyone. It just refuses to be destroyed. If this story made you feel something, please share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if you think Mara made the right choice. Tell me if you think Grant deserved another chance. Tell me what you would have done in her place. And if you want more emotional family stories with deep lessons, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us for the next story.